Welcome back, students. This is a new session wherein we'll see what directives are. We have been seeing components all the time, and now we'll see what directives are. Directive is a decorator which can be applied to a class along with additional metadata like selector, providers, etc. So when you create a directive in Angular using the command using Angular CLI, you see these coming in the directive or in the class, the decorator of the class. They can add or remove a specific HTML element on DOM. So these help us in modifying DOM, or they can change the behavior or appearance of a component by using CSS classes and styles. So this all we'll see in detail when we get started with the programming of directives. In this session we'll have an introduction of directives, and going further we have types in directives like structural directives, attribute directives, and custom directives. To learn what custom directives are, we need to understand what dependency injection is, and this we'll see after learning what dependency injection is, and throughout this session we'll understand structural directives and attribute directives. So attribute directives only change the element they are added to, whereas structural directives change the whole area in DOM as elements get added or removal. So attribute is to modify or to say change the appearance of an element, whereas structural directive they can either remove or add a new element to the DOM. Structural directives are responsible in modifying the DOM layout by adding and removing elements on DOM. So you know what DOM is. Like if you say Google and you do the inspect element of this web page, and you see this is DOM. So you can modify this using structural directives. You can either delete this entire section or you can add a section. So this kind of modification on DOM is what you can achieve using structural directives. An asterisk precedes them. This is how you can identify. It does not require brackets or parentheses like attribute directives. Three of the common built-in structural directives are ngIf, ngFor, and ngSwitch. Okay, so these are the structural directives and they begin with asterisk. The difference between making an element hidden equal to false and showing or removing an element, that is ngIf equal to false, is that first method simply hides. When you apply hidden equal to false to an element, an HTML element, you don't see that coming on DOM, but it is there actually. Whereas when you say ngIf equal to false, the comparison is the first one method simply hides the element, whereas the second one using ngIf method removes the element completely from the DOM. So this is the difference. We'll see this difference in detail when we understand ngIf in the next session. It is not possible to have more than one structural directive on a single element. Like for one single element you cannot have ngIf and ngFor applied, both like that. So we'll see ngIf now, one of the type of structural directive, and we saw a difference in having the hidden attribute placed to an element and the ngIf being applied to an element. Let's see what the difference we have. I'll have a p tag and I'll say this is a para 1. I'll save this. You see it coming on screen. Now what I'll do is I'll apply the hidden attribute and say true. So it means it's hidden now. But what does that mean? It's not available on DOM. It's there. So whenever you change the value, you see that coming and hiding on the browser, but it's always available on DOM. Though it's true or false, it's available on DOM. We'll have one more para now, and instead of hidden, we'll say ng if equal to true, or let's start with false and save it. Now we don't see it, so let us make it to true, and you see para 2 coming on screen, and also it's available on DOM, para 2. Now remember this, when we make it to false, what this will happen? This is para 2, I make it to false and I save this. You see para 2 is not on DOM at all, whereas para 1, when it is false, you don't see that coming on the browser, but it is available on DOM. When you have ng if as false, you don't see that element on DOM at all. So this was the difference I was trying to explain in the previous slide. So to have a detailed explanation on ng if, based on a property value true or false, the DOM can be modified by making an HTML element visible or removed. So based on this value true or false, I am now able to either put it on DOM or remove it from DOM. So this is what structural directive if is, based on the property. And also I can have a variable instead of having the value hard coded over here. Now I can say show a variable, and I'll have a property of type boolean, and I'll say false. Now I'll save both the files, and you see it's not there. This is always false, and now ng if is false. Now I'll make this as true and I'll save it. You see para 2 coming onto DOM. So using a property, you can modify the DOM using ng if. You saw ng if is same as the if condition that we get to see in other programming languages. Like in other programming languages, when the condition is true, execution happens. If the condition is false, then you'll skip the execution of that. And right along with if, we have else block, which comes into execution when if is false. Similar to that, we need to use template, ng template. So let's see how we can have an else part. So we have the para tag, to which we are applying ng if equal to show, and then close it, and this is if part, and we'll have the show of type boolean equal to false. Now when I save both and see, you see it's not coming. Now how can I get the else part for this? So for that, what we need to do is we need to say ng dash template, in which you can have the else related element. This is else part, but things we need to do is you need to have else over here and then an alias name like ename. This ename is exactly what you need to mention over here with an hash at its beginning. Now when I save this, you see this is else part. Now if I make it to true and save it, you see this is if part. So based on this variable's value true or false, either you display this on DOM or you display this on DOM. So this is how you achieve the else block for using ngIf and ng template. So we had a separate else block when the condition is true or false. Based on that, we are able to have an else block using ng template. Similar to this, we can also have a separate if block using ng template, and that is possible using then. So continuing with the last example, I'll have then iname, and this is the same name I'll use for another template, ng template, and I say hash iname. In here I'll have a p tag, and then I'll say this is if part. I don't need this because this is not going to be executed. So it's based on the value of show true or false. If it is true, then I'll come to this block iname. If this is false, then I'll come to the else block using ename. If I save it and see the output over here, you see this is if part, and if I make it to false, and you see else part. So there are different ways of representing the same thing. Here I am trying to show using ng template, and one point to note over here is Angular has given something like ngIf, a structural directive, with which you can do programming that is related to HTML only. It's HTML and Angular, and here it's TypeScript. With earlier programming languages like JSP and Java, you need to have a separate server-side tags in which you write all the Java code and then you combine it with HTML. So JSPs are a combination of HTML and Java, and that sort of combination is not encouraged in Angular. Angular doesn't encourage the combination of both server-side coding or the client-side coding, or even TypeScript and HTML. It segregates the technologies. It segregates HTML coding with TypeScript coding, and this is a beautiful feature of Angular. So that was ngIf and an else block to it using ng template. We'll see ngFor in this session. Let us have a collection like an array, collection of type string and some values like 1, 2, 3 and 4 and even 5. Okay, so I'll save it, and coming to the HTML, I'll have a UL and an LI, and to print all the 5 elements, or to have such 5 elements, this is what we do. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Now if you do it this way, you see an output something like this: 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Now the same thing using ngFor UL and one li, in which you say star ngFor equal to let C of collection, and you say C. This is a for loop I am using on an HTML element, and every item of the collection array I try to print it on screen. Now when I save this, you see the same thing. So your for loop repeats this li item as per the elements or number of elements we have in this collection. Similar to a for loop, ngFor iterates through a collection and displays the elements. Like let us have this collection 1, 2, 3, 4, and when you say li ngFor equal to let C of collection, this C represents the every element that you have in this collection. Based on the values of property or the collection, the variable or an array, the ngFor directive iterates over it and prints the elements of the collection through interpolation. So this is how you can use ngFor.